Welcome to the Family Share webinar on responsible research and innovation. You know that you already know what we are going to discuss and go through today in terms of topics. We just want to introduce the project very briefly. Maria San Giuliano and Marzia Cescon from Smart Venice. We are partners of the Family Share Horizon 2020 consortium. We are a research and consultancy company, and in the project we are in charge of piloting in Venice, but also coordinating the overall evaluation of the pilots in the different city labs, and we are also in charge of a task which is aimed at bringing the RRI perspective into the project. We will hear from two very prominent speakers with specific expertise on RRI from other Horizon projects, and we are very happy to discuss with them about how this can be made operational in an innovation action project as Family Share. Very briefly on how to use the how we are going to use this platform for the webinar. We were planning to collect questions using the chat box. You can see the button, the bottom black bar, and the icon with the chat. Please type the questions, your questions, whenever they pop up into your mind, even when the speakers are presenting, and then we will collect the questions, maybe group them, and ask the speakers to reply during the Q&A session. The Q&A button shall only be used to speak with our technical support in case you have any problems with the platform. And when you pose your question, you see here to the right side of the screen, please use the all panelists and attendees, let's say, scroll down menu, because we want the questions to be seen and shared among all participants. So in a nutshell, what's Family Share about? We were funded under Horizon 2020. This is the last year we are going to pilot the project. We are in the CAPSSI community, therefore collective awareness platforms in the ICT program of Horizon. We aim at offering a bottom-up solution to support work-life balance, in particular targeting families with children, with a particular focus on low-income families. We are 8 organizations around Europe, Belgium, Cyprus, Italy, Greece, Hungary. Obviously, a composition of universities. Ca' Foscari University is leading the consortium, NGOs, research foundations, SMEs, etc. We have 6 EU cities and the relevant communities of active users there. The project is really starting from the shared perception, which is also supported by evidence and studies, about insufficient childcare services coverage across Europe, lack of after-school educational activities, unless those are on payment, and a trend to isolation in urban context. So the Family Share really aims at bringing together bottom-up social innovation supported by a digital tool that we co-designed during the first year of the project, and to encourage parents, both men and women, mothers and fathers, into socializing and share time for collectively taking care of kids. So basically, as already said, we are piloting in 6 cities, and we are putting a lot of efforts in community building, trying to interpret the sharing economy at its best, let's say, in its more genuine way. A really important part is then played by the family share application, of course. So the task we are organizing this webinar is precisely about evaluating the project processes and the platform from an RRI perspective. We are designing a framework to do so, to conduct such an evaluation, and therefore we aim at learning from those projects which are specifically doing research and producing tools on RRI. Why RRI is relevant for family share? Well, basically, almost all of the 6 dimensions of RRI are extremely important for us. Public engagement, because of course we need to have a bottom-up participation and appropriation of the family share model and the app itself. Governance, and also because we use co-design as a way to highlight the needs and requirements to design the ICT tool that we are using. Governance, because of course the role of public authorities and institutions is extremely important for the project, and we actually hope that they let's say, can continue the use and of the platform itself and embed it into the local offer of childcare services. Gender equality, because we are using this project as a way to promote and enhance men's engagement in childcare activities, and this is really important for us as an objective, although it also proves to be one of the big challenges of the project. Ethics, there's a lot of aspects that we are tackling related to data protection, especially because children are engaged, and therefore this is an important component. And okay, open access, this is the principle that we are using to sharing research results of the project. Probably the less relevant component is science education. Maybe it is there, but it's not as much relevant as the others. Let's say we could interpret the use of the platform as a way to, let's say, support digital literacy, especially for the less skilled groups of among our beneficiaries. So we are very much in need of knowing more about RRI from the true experts, and we have invited the first 2 that we have in our webinar series. I would like to give the floor now to Eric Riesler from IHS Vienna, the Institute for Advanced Studies. Eric is a partner in the NewHoRRIzon and SUPERMoRRI projects, also funded via Horizon. Researcher at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Vienna since 1999, and Vice President of the Austrian Society of Sociology, but also head of the research group on technoscience and societal transformation. The floor is yours, Eric, and thank you.
Are you going to share my screen? Ah, okay. Can you now see my screen?
Yes, we do.
And you can hear me? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for to the Families Share project for inviting me. And I was giving the task to present on responsible research and innovation, useful hints from the New Horizon project. I hope I can give you some useful hints. What I would like to talk today is our 5 topics. One is to start with our understanding of responsible research and innovation, because although we already heard how the Families Share project understands responsible research and innovation, and I would like to add a little bit to that as well. Then I would like to tell you a little bit about the New Horizon project and what we want to achieve there. And also what is our approach in the New Horizon project in order to achieve these goals. Also, I would like to give you an idea about the situation from which the New Horizon project started, and then tell you a little bit about the activities we did and where we stand right now. So what is our understanding of responsible research and innovation? And I think it already starts that there is a serious problem with the definition of responsible research and innovation, because there are so many of them and they are competing. There's a kind of competition between them. On the one hand, there is this policy concept of the European Commission, and the Families Shares project already, Massi already introduced us into this umbrella definition of the 5 or 6 keys, which include public engagement, gender equality, science education, science literacy, open access, and ethics and governance. But there is also a competing academic concept which says actually we should look, it's not so much that these policy issues are of relevance, but it's more a process or how research is carried out. And there is this idea that there is anticipation, so that researchers should think about what the research results and what kind of impact they might have on society. There is also this notion of inclusion, which goes together with public engagement, so that relevant stakeholders and the public should be engaged and included into research. It's also this kind of reflexivity that which might be related to ethics in this umbrella term, this understanding of that you should reflect as a researcher on the activities you are doing, and the notion of responsiveness, that you work in structures and organizations who should be responsive to the outcome of anticipation, inclusion, and reflexivity. So they have more fluid or reflexive and responsive research system than it seems to be the case. So then we have on the first, we have this policy concept, which is very strongly supported and pushed by the European Commission. And then we have this competing academic concept. And in addition to that, there is a third concept, which says actually there is already so much in different organizations. There's already so much going on in terms of responsible research, research and innovation, a kind of de facto ROI, which exists in different fields, like in industry, corporate social responsibility. Then the notion of sustainability, which is gaining more and more importance. The notion of ethics, of research ethics and research integrity, which is dealing with ethical questions on the level of research, and also the notion of bioethics, which is important, or medical ethics, which is important in medicine. So that different communities say, okay, we don't talk about RI, we talk about different things which are important in our field. So, and if you take this, all these competing concepts together, RI is basically about the mutual relationship between science and society. So I think it's very important to have this kind of flexibility, and it's also, we took this flexibility in our NewHoRRIzon project to, on the one hand, to look at the policy concept from the European Commission, on the other hand, also to look at this academic concept of anticipation, inclusion, reflexivity, and responsiveness, but also to be open for existing de facto RI, which might be in different organizations already there. So, having said a little bit about our understanding of responsible research and innovation, what is actually the NewHoRRIzon concept, what is the NewHoRRIzon project, and what do we want to achieve in this project? So NewHoRRIzon is a project funded by the European Commission in the framework program, in the SWOFS program. It has a duration of 4 years. It's about 6.8 million euro, and it has about 19 partners, and we are trying to promote the acceptance of the concept of responsible research and innovation in Horizon 20 and beyond. So what we actually try is to take the concept of responsible research and innovation and to put it in the framework program of the European Commission. And how are we going to do this? You know, we are trying to do this, and this might not be different from what Families Share is trying to do. We're trying to co-create with stakeholders tailor-made actions and activities in each section of the Horizon 2020 program. So what we actually try to do is we bring together the actors who are relevant for a certain topic or a certain problem, and together with them we try to find solutions how to implement responsible research and innovation in Horizon 2020. What is important for us is that, and I will show this slide afterwards, is if you think about Horizon 2020, it's many different program lines which are kind of separated. And what we also want to do in this project is to stimulate learning between these sectors and in between these program lines. We want to provide a global perspective on responsible research and innovation, disseminate information beyond the European Union. I think what you very often can see is that responsible research and innovation is thought as a European concept or as an US American concept, but there are many other understandings of responsibility out there in the world. And we also want to connect to this global perspective of responsible research and innovation. We want to develop and co-create a societal readiness thinking tool, and Niels is going to present this after my presentation. We want to reflect, learn, and evaluate what we are doing, similar to the Families Share project, who is evaluating its RI, its project from an RI perspective. We also want to promote the integration of responsible research and innovation, not only on the European level, but also in national funding programs, and disseminate best practices or good practices of responsible research and innovation to relevant stakeholders. On this slide, you can see our consortium at the kickoff meeting in Vienna. So what is the NewHoRRIzon approach? And I think I will be very brief in order to stay in time. So what we actually are doing is we are trying to have social labs. We create something what we call social labs. And actually, what is a social lab? I think it's similar to the Families Share project, where the question is how to raise your children, how can you cooperate to raise your children, how can you create a work-life balance which is positive for parents and for children. It is bring together people with a complex problem and try to help them to solve this problem together. So these social labs, what we call them social labs, is they are interactive. Interactive in the sense that people are talking to each other and together they are creating solutions. They are experimental, so people are trying out certain things, certain solutions. They learn about certain certain solutions and the problems and the challenges involved in them. They might change the solutions, and they are systemically created in terms of that we try to bring together relevant stakeholders which are important in order to solve a particular program. In the NewHoRRIzon project, we established 19 social labs, which represented all the program lines within within Horizon 2020. You can see here on this graph, this what I show with the cursor is the entire program Horizon 2020. You can find here, for instance, the SWOFS program, or here you can find the European Research Council, or you can find here the different societal challenges which are addressed by Horizon 2020. And for each of these program lines, we created social labs in which we brought together relevant stakeholders to address the problem within this program line. So in the social lab itself, we bring together the important societal actors on each program line. I already said that we are trying to be inclusive there, to get and heterogeneous, to get all the relevant stakeholders in there, and they have about 14 to 20 participants. So what were the criteria for selecting people for these social labs? They should have come from a wide range of disciplines and research fields. They should be a mix of practitioners, policy governance people, academic researchers, and industry. They should be in order to make changes in their organization. So people who really feel that they have agency in the organization to move them towards our ROI. It was not important whether they knew the concept of responsible research and innovation. It was important that it is gender balanced and that it has a mix of countries across Europe. Here you can see how the social lab actually worked. So actually you could also say that the social labs are, the backbone of the social labs are 3 workshops we had. A first workshop at the beginning of the social lab, a second workshop in the midst, and a final workshop on the end. And in these workshops, people were talking about finding a shared understanding of the problems they are facing, looking for possible solutions for the problems, developing certain pilot activities in how they could address these problems, experimenting with these pilot activities, and by experimenting with them generate learning, and based on this learning again come back in the next workshop and see what can be adopted, what can be continued, what can be changed, what kind of new activities should be made in order to address a certain problem, which in the case of the NewHoRRIzon project always was, how can we integrate this concept of responsible research innovation into research, into the research of a particular program line. I think I already mentioned this, and we saw this slide already. So a pilot action, I think this is also very important to know, is what is a pilot? What is a pilot action? What did we want to do, people to do? So a pilot action should be something which should address the problem which is identified by the actors, by the relevant stakeholders within a program line, what hinders them to implement responsible research and innovation and in their activity, in their research activity. So for instance, if they identified a certain gender problem, or they identified the problem of how to include the public into their research, so what could be measures in order to help them, for instance, to decrease the gender gap in a certain research area, or what could they do in order to implement, to have more public engagement within their research. But these pilot actions should be small. They should not overburden the institution with additional administrative tasks, and ideally they should strengthen already existing practices towards RRI. On this slide, you can see the work packages of the New Horizon project. In work package 2, 3, 4, and 5, we have the social labs. In work package 7 and 8, we have learning and learning across the social labs and evaluating the social labs. And in work package 6, this is something which Niels is going to present. We have the society readiness thinking tool. So what is the situation from which New Horizon started? As you might know, the concept of responsible research and innovation is a cross-cutting issue in Horizon 2020. And in order to find out how this was adopted and adapted in Horizon 2020, we did 150 interviews with different stakeholders in the different program lines. And what we could see there was that there were, on the one hand, certain program lines were very well advanced in responsible research and innovation, but others, there was not much going on in terms of responsible research and innovation and adopting this concept. And one of them, one reason for them was that RRI was asked for in the work programs, but actually it was then not implemented in evaluation criteria, in calls, and therefore also not in projects. So on the one hand, there were certain areas where responsible research and innovation was well adopted, but on the other hand, it was not really well implemented in the different program lines. So, and this was the situation which we wanted to address in these different social labs. Okay. So what did we do? What did we do to improve this situation? So on the one hand, I'm just showing you, and to give you a little idea about these social lab workshops we carried out. So we had in these we are starting in the last year of our project, and as you can see, we already had in almost all of our social labs, we had the workshops done. And as you can see, in these workshops, we had about 250 or 260 participants involved. These were, as you can see on this slide, they were more or less gender balanced. In the second workshop cycle, we had more women than men. You can see on this next slide the number of participants in each of the social labs, and I'm rushing through these slides because I think the Family Share project is willing to share these slides with you after this webinar. They are rather only for illustration. Here you can see that we also covered many European countries, but also beyond Europe. And I think what is important here is that to see, okay, what kind of pilot activities did the stakeholders develop in the social labs. So one important thing was that there was really a need for training in RRI, so that people had the feeling we want to know about RRI, we want to know about how we can implement RRI, and we want to know how what are good practices and what can we learn from these good practices. And these trainings were either addressed at researchers, and when they were addressed at researchers, they focused on either on junior researchers or on senior researchers. Training also included training for industry, but also different target groups. So it was kind of amazing for me personally that many NCPs, national contact points, were not very well informed about RRI, and there was a great need also to involve national contact points who actually know the Horizon 2020 program about responsible research and innovation. What was also important is not only to train people, but also to even make a step beyond before that, which was raising awareness. Raising awareness for the importance of RRI. So that meant adapting policy documents and lobbying. So really to lobby for RRI, that RRI is an important topic in research and in research funding. It also meant dissemination and science education. It meant to have particular showcases in which we could show the impact, the costs and the benefits of RRI. It also meant, since I started out with that there is no unified concept of responsible research innovation, also to point out where are the connections between responsible research and innovation and other de facto RRI concepts. And also to show the connection between the concept of transdisciplinary research and responsible research and innovation. So there was training was important, raising awareness was important, but one particular point within the RI concept, the concept of public engagement was also very important. So many of the pilot activities that were developed were addressed towards public and stakeholder engagement. These were either face-to-face or they were online, and also governance of public stakeholder engagement was important. Particularly academic careers are evaluated by impact, meaning academic impact, but how is it possible also to have public engagement activities as an important factor which is used in the evaluation of academic career. Another important point in the pilot activities which were developed by the stakeholders was institutional change and governance. That means how are our institutions, are they well developed and are they well equipped to really have RI, or do we need certain changes there? So that meant adapting funding. It meant adapting evaluation and rewarding, the evaluation and rewarding system. It particular measures to help to enable institutions to act towards RI, and even to create institutions which are dedicated towards RI. And then we also had one or two pilot activities which actually tried to apply responsible research innovation in projects and products. So on the one hand, we were quite successful in doing that, but we also had a number of challenges which we experienced in our social labs. They were mainly the question of stakeholder involvement. How do you find stakeholders? How do you engage them? And how do you keep them engaged? And it was always a problem in project management in terms of how can you commit people in the social labs which have scarce resources in time and money in order to deal with responsible research and innovation. It was the RI focus was always a problem in terms of keeping them really targeted towards the goals of the NewHoRRIzon project and RI. The feasibility of the pilot actions was a big challenge to help the social lab participants to develop projects which are small enough in order so that they are feasible, but also to be large enough in order to have some change. And as always, when you work together with groups, there were frictions. There were also frictions in the piloting process. The social labs had to deal with these frictions. So that's a little bit from the NewHoRRIzon project and from my side, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric, for your presentation. It was really interesting and clear. We can now open the Q&A session. We are a little bit late on the agenda, so maybe we can keep it for 5 minutes and then eventually keep the last question for last just Q&A section at the end of the second presentation. But I invite all participants to type any questions they have. Sorry, I didn't share my screen yet. If there are any questions, of course, participants are welcome to share them in the chat, and I will read them and ask to Eric. So, okay, we already have one question. The leader of the Family Share project is asking if there's something that the partners of Family Share can do in order to contribute to NewHoRRIzon project. Have some suggestions, Eric?
Yes, of course. I mean, we are going to have several meetings and conferences. So the Family Share project, I think there are overlapping topics there. And I think an exchange would be extremely helpful, and also to learn from you, from your how you developed your project and how you integrated. I mean, when you started with your presentation, you already said which kind of keys were important for you. So to learn about your how you integrated it would be extremely helpful. So learning more about the project and then going from there, how we could continue and increase cooperation would be extremely helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. I had one curiosity regarding the social labs you were talking about, and I was wondering if these social labs involve different territories, and if people that take part to the social labs are coming from different countries. So how you handle the fact that they come from different countries, let's say, if it is the chance, if they are all the same for any workshop you do, or they kind of change in the time, the process.
I think I didn't get. Could you pose the question again? I think I had difficulties hearing you.
Okay, sorry. My question, I try to speak a bit louder.
Yeah.
The question was about the composition of the social labs you were talking about.
Yeah.
If they are composed by people coming from the same country, I don't think so.
No.
But how you handle it, and if they are composed by always the same people, or they change?
Okay.
Time,
first of all, it was extremely important since not to have people only from one country. So we had people from different countries. I think this wasn't a problem at all. I think this is just normal in the context of the European Union. So this didn't pose a problem. What was more a problem was, as I already said, to find people who really wanted to commit them for this 1.5 and 2 years to this social lab. And I can only speak from my perspective. I was responsible for the social lab of the ERC, so basic research, and we had a change. We had continuous change in the social lab, but we kept those people who really did a pilot actions. They continuously cooperated and were present in the social lab, but we tried always to adopt to people leaving, finding new people who might be interested in, for instance, in the last social lab, we tried to add new people who might be interested in adopting and carrying further the pilot action. So there was a change, but this was not necessarily bad.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no more questions for the moment, maybe we can we thank Eric for his presentation, of course, and
thank you very much.
Ask him to stay.
Yes, I will.
To if we have other questions after Neil's presentation. So I proceed with presenting the next speaker. So, just a moment. Seems not working. Try it again, sorry.
Matsia, I'm happy to say just a few words about myself, if that's easier.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry.
No problem at all. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Niels Meilgaard, professor at Aarhus University, associate dean for internationalization at the School of Business and Social Sciences also, and a partner in the NewHoRRIzon project. I'm very happy to be offered the opportunity to also say a few words here, and I'll be sharing my screen if I can make the technical parts of it work, but I think so. And I will be, just a second. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, yes, we can see it.
Very good. Now, I'm also part, I have the pleasure of being part of Erik's project, NewHoRRIzon. And Erik has just informed you, I think, very succinctly about the major methods or the methodology of invoking processes of change in research and innovation that the NewHoRRIzon project employs, and those are specifically the social labs and the pilot activities, where we give researchers beyond the core of the project responsibility for setting in motion their own change processes, and in that sense they become change agents also within their own organizations. I'll take you to a corner of the NewHoRRIzon project, which is a different methodology, specifically what we call now the societal readiness thinking tool. It's developed as part of a separate work package, but it relates very strongly to the overall mission and objectives of the NewHoRRIzon project. Now, the inspiration or the provocation, in a sense, was part of the call for the project, where a requirement for developing something that could potentially be a parallel to what is commonly known as technology readiness levels was presented as something that could be a desirable output of the project. So we struggled with answering the question of how we might think about societal readiness levels as a kind of competing or complementary taxonomy to that of the technology readiness level. We went through quite a extensive literature review. We ended up designing something which is radically different from the well-known TRL taxonomy. We've tested a tool and launched it a couple of months back, and I'll be spending my minutes here just telling a little bit about what the tool then looks like. Rather than having the idea of linear progression, which is very much the underlying logic of technology readiness levels, we wanted to adopt the core concepts of responsible research and innovation by thinking about an alternative approach, which is less linear, which is significantly more iterative, which requires iterative reflection, and which is tailored to research projects. So what we basically said is that there are four traditional typical phases of a research project: that of research design and formulating the problems, that of implementing or collecting data, that of data analysis, evaluating the results, and the phase of launching and disseminating the results of the project. We use then stage gating architecture to develop a an approach to iterative reflection that takes into account the procedural components of responsible research and innovation, that is reflection, inclusion, responsiveness, anticipation, and so on, but which also addresses the more tangible policy keys that both Maria and Erik were mentioning before. We also try to acknowledge the fact, which is captured in Collingwood's dilemma, that while it is easy to change processes at an early stage of a project, it is often also very uncertain and very difficult to detect the needs for change at early stages. So iteration becomes a kind of response to that dilemma. Now, what we did basically was explore the literature and develop and harvest questions that are useful to address at each of the 4 gates of a traditional research project. We then summarize them in a 6x4 matrix, one for each of the gates. So basically, this is the core of our thinking tool. It's a set of about 150 questions or 200 questions, around 50 for each of the 4 gates. Now, while we think the questions are good, and we think that the idea of stage gating also is sensible, we also very quickly discovered that having 4 matrices or 4 tables like this and offering that as a thinking tool was not feasible in any way at all. It's simply too difficult to work with, and there was a significant risk that our product would never be used by any research projects if it were to come in the shape of these 4 tables. So we went through a rather extensive design phase and ended up agreeing that we would like a web-based solution, so that we'd be able to present the thinking tool in a much more user-friendly and accessible and easy navigable way. Now, this is just to give you an impression of the design phase that we have been through, and this is basically how our tool now looks. And I'd like to just very quickly show you how it works. So this is our thinking tool. So here's the thinking tool. This is the first page, the front page of the thinking tool. It's called thinkingtool.eu. It's very easy to find. There's a bit of an explanation of what we mean by societal readiness. There's an introductory video, which takes about 4 or 5 minutes, and I'll encourage you to take a look at it later on. And then there's the access to the tool. Once you get to the opening page, you start the tool. You can either resume an existing project, so you can return to a project, it's automatically stored, or you can create a new project. Now, I'm just gonna give it a try. Hang on a second. As an example, you would log in and you would be facing the 4 gates. So depending on where your project is, one of these gates would be the appropriate one. And as you move towards later stages of your project, you can re-enter the thinking tool and address some of the other stages. Now, at the opening stage of a project, you would go into stage 1. This is basically asking, why are you here? And as a project team, you might want to say, we are here to address societal challenges and trends, such as responsible research innovation and the SDGs. This basically then takes you into to the tool. There's a reminder of a code which would allow you to re-enter the thinking tool at any point in time. But that will also be automatically generated in a PDF when you've stopped using the tool. Now, depending on, I'm just going to remove this one. Depending on your aspirations, what you think is interesting for the project, you might tick off some of the boxes. Now it basically is a set of questions that reflect each of the cells in the table. But as Maria said in the beginning, we might think that in a project science education is of less relevant, we take it off, and that reduces the number of questions. Now, for each question will be posed at the center of the circle. So this is one question, which says who will be the primary users, beneficiaries of the projects, and could this change? Now, this might be families, there might be other users, beneficiaries, and so on. And the idea is that the project or the consortium, the group as a whole, discuss each of the questions and provide an answer to it. Now, having answered one question, you turn to the next question, and so on. If you think at some stage that the questions which are summarized here are not exhaustive and you want to add your own question, you can do so down here at the right-hand side bottom. And it will appear here, and you can give an answer to it, and then move on to the next question. Now, once you have answered all the questions in a group, you're able to generate a PDF. This should arrive here, which basically captures the questions, the answers that you've given to each question. It also reminds you of the name of the project and the entry code if you wish to re-enter at a different point in time. So this is basically for the archive. In answering questions, you might want to look into resources that could be inspirational or could be helpful for the project. You can either hover over or press to methods, and it'll show you a number of related methods for engagement or for foresight or other sorts of resources that are relevant to the specific question, and these can be often pursued following a link. At later stages, now as in the example of your own family share project, you might want to go to gate 3, which is a different set of questions which relate much more to the analysis, evaluation stage of a project. And again, you might want to check off or check some of the keys and conditions, and that will either increase or reduce the numbers of questions. Here we have more than 20-25 questions, which is probably a lot, maybe even too much. Now, at the end, you generate the PDF. And that will capture everything, including your answers to questions at the next at the next gates. So this is basically the main features of the thinking tool. It is really rather straightforward. We have had the tool tested by a number of in a number of pilot settings with good results. There have been quite a few amendments and changes to the features that are in the thinking tool now, and what we believe we have now is a fully operational version of it. We've also seen that there's an interest. There were actually 35 real projects now using the tool, so not pilot or test projects, but actual projects working with the tool as a way to enhance higher degrees of responsibility and reflexivity in their own project work. We've seen an interest on the side of the European Commission and national research funders in potentially wanting to explore the opportunities of using the tool in relation to funding schemes as well. So there is an interest certainly from both project teams, but also from some of the core actors in the field of trying this out. Now, just finishing off, what we're trying to do now is, of course, to increase visibility and uptake of the tool. We're thinking about whether a user community of some sort would be interesting. Based on the feedback mechanisms, there is an opportunity within the tool to suggest improvements or to add questions that we might use. We are thinking about iterations, improvements of the tool. At the moment, we don't ask anything in terms of registration, and we don't ask anything in terms of informed consent, which basically means that we cannot use any of the data. They are accessible only to the project teams, and they are stored at a secure server at my department it's a separate server at Aarhus University. But obviously, if we see that a lot of projects are picking up on this opportunity and start using it, we do believe that the tool could potentially be a very interesting site for research purposes, for exploring and understanding what kind of questions projects are tackling across different sorts of disciplinary areas. If we do want to use the tool for research at any point in time, we would need to ask permission by the users, obviously. We are also talking about maintenance of the project beyond the NewHoRRIzon project time span, and we have ensured that it will be operational also after the end of the project. I apologize. I think that's it for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Niels. It was really an interesting presentation, and we believe that the thinking tool can be really useful also for our project to assess R&I in the course of the project. And for this regard, I would like to ask you if then you believe that it can be useful to to feel it more different phases of the project then, in order to kind of assess the progress of it. Do you believe it's useful to not to do it just once, but in different phases?
I do believe that in an ideal world, even before a proposal is submitted for research projects, in the infant stages of a project idea, it would be wonderful if the participants would get together, spend a day reflecting about how using the tool to reflect about how they might become more responsible in the context of the research projects. And then iteratively returning aided, helped by the tool, to those questions during the lifespan of the project. Now, we're not living in and I think this was also one of the conclusions that Erik conveyed from our social labs and from our pilot activities. We don't live in an ideal world. Sometimes we have to be pragmatic about what's feasible and what's not feasible. I imagine that a lot of projects will try this once. Those that are early starters and can actually do it in the early stages of the project will probably return to it. But there will be projects like the Families Share project that are already in very advanced stages of the project. So it might be interesting to look at the final stages. So I think that we are in the project phase now of having to communicate our results, of disseminating, of interacting in the final stages. How can we do that in a responsible manner? Well, I would say, based on the presentations that we heard in the beginning, you're already doing quite a lot when it comes to thinking about being responsible. But our hope would be that you might that our thinking tool might invoke even more reflection, or there might be blind spots in your own kind of thinking that might be interesting to explore. And of course, we'd be happy also also to hear your thoughts if you do at some stage try out the tool.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have a question, and so the participant is asking if the tool is providing any feedback to the project coordinators about the entered data. So if there are any feedback on how good or bad you're like scoring on certain data criteria. Sorry.
Yeah, it's an I think that's an excellent that's an excellent question. Now, if we had pursued the thought of ending up in a taxonomy, you might imagine that we could have said, well, based on your responses, we think that you can score an 8, or we think that you can score a 9 on a societal readiness level scale. But we very quickly realized that this is not the purpose of our own thinking. It's not the purpose of the tool. I think that the feedback will be very much based on the interaction between those participants who actually take part in filling in the questions and discussing the questions. So I think that there will be feedback loops within. Now, if we were to imagine that not 35, maybe not 50, but 300 or 400 projects would actually use the tool, I think there would be potentially a wonderful opportunity for benchmarking in a very qualitative sense of that word. So you might think that projects that relate in one way or the other could learn from other projects that are already there. So see, what are the answers to these kind of questions within other projects? So I think that there are some underexplored opportunity for learning across projects that are not handled as the tool stands right now, but could potentially be part of an iteration. At the moment, there's no feedback apart from the PDF, which is automatically generated, capturing exactly what you have written yourself.
Okay, thank you very much for your explanation. There are other questions. They are welcome. We still have a bit of time, not much, but a little bit. Otherwise, we move to conclusions. And of course, if Eric wants to implement and add something, of course, you are welcome.
No, actually not. I just want to praise Niels for his work he has been doing. I think this is a very practical, and we already saw, and we already are seeing that we can really implement it in research project. I'm currently starting a project which is in the field of medicine, and we are going to use this tool because it's going to be, I think, rather helpful for people who are not so familiar with the concept of RRI, but will help them to see what it actually means for their own research project by posing this kind of basic questions. So I think this is extremely also, although Niels said it's in a kind of a niche of the New Horizon project, I think it's a very helpful and valuable outcome in itself.
Yes, I do agree. There is another question. How did you select or define the questions for the tool for a center team area? What was the methodology behind it?
Thank you very much. That's also, I think, an excellent question. Well, many of the questions that are in the cells in the tool are harvested from literature. So we basically explored a couple of hundred papers on responsible research and innovation and teased out what we believe are the important questions that are inherently or explicitly within the text. There are also other tools available, and we have gone through some length to actually explore what would be transferable to our own tool so that we can learn and integrate with existing resources as well. So quite a lot is in the literature already. It's also very heavily referenced, so you'll find it in the background, in the back paper, which is accessible from the front page. So there's so every author that we draw upon is credited in the work for obvious reasons. We've also been rather creative when it comes to blind spots, and this has been a co-creating process, exactly as we have been working in the rest of the NewHoRRIzon project. So it's been co-creation between the team responsible for developing the tool, the wider consortium, and also our constituencies. And this includes the social lab participants, so it's also non-RRI researchers that have been involved in the questions, in refining the questions and validating them. We have asked universities, funding agencies, including the EC, also to comment on the questions. Sometimes this has led to changes. Sometimes it hasn't. At the end of the day, it's the authors of the tool who are responsible for the questions. It's difficult. We haven't pulled it out of thin air. We have really tried to see that, to ensure that the questions are individually comprehensible and also meaningful, and cover adequately what we would expect to find in the cells of the matrix. And of course, it's imperfect. I'm sure that there will be users who say, why this question is rubbish, or why don't we have a different question here? And what we invite, of course, and we also do that on the front page, is that if anyone have good feedback, and I'm sure that we already get feedback, then we're very happy to revisit some of the questions, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this explanation. Actually, I had the chance to have a look to the tools before our webinar. I found it really interesting and even easy to use, to be honest. So we will for sure use it in the next period for this RRI assessment purposes, of course. Okay, so if there are no more questions, maybe we can lead to the conclusion of this webinar. So of course, I would like to thank you, Niels and Eric, for their participation to the webinar and for their very interesting presentations.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I hope you also appreciated to take part to this session. And I also thank, of course, the participants who take part to the webinar and with also their questions. And it was really interesting to learn about another project dealing with this, let's say, delicate topic as RRI, and to learn about the concept behind the project activities and the role and the work that the social labs are doing, and to learn about, of course, the social readiness thinking tool that we believe that they could be really applied also to our project for assessing it. I will close this session reminding you about the next webinar, because this is just one, let's say, of the sessions we are organizing on this topic. And the second one will be, as you are seeing from the screen, on the 11th of March, still at 1 p.m. So during the next session, we will be more focused on RRI indicators, and especially on the 6 key dimensions. And we will have the great pleasure to have Ingeborg Major, PhD, which is a senior researcher in society using research of the University of Leiden. So we are very happy to have her on board. And again, thank you very much. If you wish to, you will find the recording of this webinar in our YouTube channel. So you see now our details, let's say, and you can keep track on also the family share progresses and next steps through our website and Facebook page and Twitter as well. Yeah, that's it basically. We hope to see you again in the next webinar session, and we wish you a nice afternoon. Thank you again to our speakers for their really high quality speech. Thank you very much.